Everyone. Greetings from the Office of Career Services, IIT Delhi. I'm Rituja Shaitya, CTM at OCS IIT Delhi. I would like to welcome you all to this session. So OCS has organized today's workshop specifically for all the incoming third year rights who are interested in pursuing internships in the field of software development during the upcoming internship session. I'm really excited to announce that we have with us Anjali ma'am, Harshit sir, Simran ma'am, and Vishwas sir. They had all gone through a similar process and bagged an intern in their third year in the similar field. So they'll be taking a session of 10 minutes each, guiding us through their experiences and journey. And after that, we'll have a question and answer session in the end. You can put your questions in the question and answer box during that time. So without further delay, I would like to call upon Anjali ma'am, who is interning at Google. A very warm welcome to you, ma'am. We would like to hear it from you. I kindly request you to turn on your video so that we can hear you. Over to you.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. So hello everyone. I'm a dual degree student. So I sat for internship processes in my fourth year. I'm in computer science department, and currently I'm interning at Google as a SWA intern. So starting with the preparation process. Uh, I did not do a lot of CP like a lot of people do from first year. So I did not do that. So I mostly prepared in last summer vacations for the intern processes, and it mostly constituted of like 2 3 platforms. One platform I would highly recommend to everyone is Interview Bit. So like most of you would know, there is a complete series of questions which it has, and uh, the questions are tagged with the topic. So that kind of helped me to prepare topic wise, like starting with arrays, then linked list, and so on. In a similar manner, for more practice, I went to platforms like LeetCode and GFG. And on GFG, there is a list of questions like must do questions for XX companies. So that is a list of 200 questions, which mostly cover all the basic concepts you need to get a basic understanding of all the data structures which might be asked in any of the like internship tests or interviews. So yeah, for preparation, it was mostly this. Like what I used to do is block some time, like I would give this much time to a question according to its difficulty, and practice a fixed amount of questions daily. Like since you have only have around 60 days, your processes start around 5 August, and the test would start like 2 weeks before that, and that time would be a very hectic time. Like you would have tests and classes would also be there, तो तुम लोग पूरा दिन busy हो रहोगे. So let's just count your preparation time for around 45 days. So in that time you have to manage कि कितने questions you have to do every day and what topic you have to focus on most. And yeah, so in general, like all the topics are equally important, but the most one topic I feel is most asked and there are most questions about is the dynamic programming. So in almost each of the tests I got, there was one or two questions from dynamic programming, and all of my interviews had one question from DP. So like that is a very important topic, and please do all the basic questions, like all the standard questions of this. Mm, yeah. So yeah, that's like an overview of how I prepared. And what was next? Yeah, so regarding tests. So internship tests were like they started 2 weeks before the interviews, and the Google, specifically Google's test were even 1 week before that. So it was 3 weeks before the actual interview. Uh, the test had like two questions. One was on DP and one was on bitmasking. And I would rate the level around like medium to hard, like lead code medium to hard, or if lead code is another platform which where there are tags like easy, medium, hard, and I would in that you could say if you practice from there. So me just practice medium and hard questions. those are the level of questions which come in interview or the test. So for Google, it was like that. And for all other companies, the test started 2 weeks before, and all those tests were offline. So, like if you want to ask for a specific company, you can ask later in the Q&A session. Mm, yeah. So yeah, for like mainly in the tests, it happens like you know the answer, but you might not get the code running because you might not have that time practice. So try when you are practicing, you keep yourself in a time limit and practice according to that. Mm, yeah. And moving on to my interview experience. So on day one, I had 5 interviews. Like one of them was Rubrik, Google, Microsoft, JPMC, and Goldman Sachs. And like all of them have different interview processes. For me, all of them were most SD roles only. Like all the interviews I gave were for SD roles. So the standard process is you would have like 2 rounds of interviews, each of 45 minutes. And for Google specifically, if I tell you, for each round you're expected to answer one question, like to solve a question completely. For me, in the first round, the question was based on graphs. I would say it was of medium difficulty level. And if you do that question quickly, they would give you another question, and you can solve 2 questions in that one interview. But in Google's interview, they specifically check that like they make you write code on a Google Doc. So you have to like name the variables काफी ढंग से. You have to make sure you're indenting correctly. You have to kind of remember the syntax. Like it's not very strict, but it is preferred that you are writing the code as you would write in a contest. You have to, as you would write like kind of a compilable code you are writing. So मतलब they actually check the quality of your code. And for me, the round two was again one DP question. So should I tell you about like how was the interview process for other companies as well?
Uh, yeah, we would love to hear your experiences, ma'am.
Yeah, so okay. So like if you have a lot of interviews on day one, it gets kind of hectic because they are scheduled back to back, like 45 to 50 minutes in one interview and then again next interview. And it starts from 8 a.m. So for me, the first interview of the day was rubric, and for like they simply, if you're going for that company, you would have to have experience in like competitive programming. For me, they asked a question which was kind of a 3D dynamic programming question. So yeah, for a company like that, you would need somewhat practice of the level of a competitive programming hard questions. And okay, I already told about what the Google interview was like. And for me, the Microsoft role was data science role, so I would just skip that. Uh, JPMC has 2 rounds of interviews and one HR interview. So HR interviews are very difficult if you have done well in like the SD interviews. So for the first round, it was some standard questions like tree. Actually, in both the rounds, the questions were based on trees or graphs, and there was one small, I think, part in which they also asked puzzles for JPMC. So yeah, that was it. But you are able to tell them like which field you are more interested in, and according to that, they asked me questions. Like I told them I'm more interested in software roles, and they sent me for a software round. Uh, and for GS, it was 3 rounds, like 3 rounds of 20 or 25 minutes, and they all those rounds were of only this software questions. And 2 or 3 questions I know in my interviews were standard questions, like which I had already practiced from GFG or interview bit. Also, I would suggest if you are giving the test, along with giving the test, you just try out the questions you did not get right in those tests. Because a lot of times this happens that a question comes in one test and you might encounter that question in another test or in an interview. Like for me, that happened. For me, one of the questions I could not solve in a test came in one of my interviews and I was able to solve it. So just like solve all the questions. You can solve more questions basically. Alright.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing such great insights. It would really help us all. Next, I would like to invite Harshit sir, who's interning at Optiver. A very warm welcome to you, sir. Over to you.
Hi Ratuja, thanks for the welcome. Hi everyone, hope you all are doing well. So I guess I'll begin with the experience of my how I prepared. So basically, I was targeting both quant and SD roles, and like for me, I started preparing in my summer vacations, not anything before that. I had really no experience of CP, although I am in CS in my third year, so I knew how to program, but CP is kind of different from regular programming. So to start off for SD preparation mainly, I tried to go around Geeks for Geeks, which had like a great page which it says all the important interview topics. And then I also focused on a bit of lead code. I practiced around 400 questions, starting from easy. Like in easy, you do not need to code all the questions. I could just solve them in my mind about how I would go about it. Then going to like medium questions, and at the end, a little bit like 50 around hard questions. So that is how I went about like practicing DSA. I would say the Geeks for Geeks materials and resources are way better than lead code or interview bit resources because they are way more organized and you have every topic listed there and every like for example in dynamic programming you can have different types of dynamic programming, how it is used in like longest common subsequence or things like that. It has a very great list. Also there is a site called practice.geeksforgeeks.com which has really good practice questions if you want to try that out. I did not do a lot of CP as per like code forces or stuff. I did not do a lot of that, although I gave like 4 or 5 contests and both are all of Div 2. And I think that gave me a fair bit of idea, but I would not say that I was very, very good at CP because the hard questions in the CP, they tend to go about number theory and stuff, which involves more of calculations. So I was not that good in CP, but I was fairly good in DSA. And that is what I kept my focus around. For quant roles, I'll keep it short because this is mainly an SD workshop. For quant roles, I practiced a bit of Brainstellar. I solved the problems there. Then I went about 50 challenging problems. I think you might have heard of the book. And then I also did a bit of the herd on the street. The book's name is The Herd on the Street. So that is what I tried to go about for my quant preparation. Coming to how the tests go around, I think it is a very, very exhaustive process. I have given like tests from the beginning of the day till 12 in the night even. So there are days when you don't even have the time to eat, have lunch and stuff. So those are really, really exhaustive days. So make sure you're healthy during those days. That is a very important thing, which I think many people miss out on. So be prepared for giving 6, 7 tests back to back in the day. And even during your weekends, you'll have tests. During the days you are having classes, you would have tests then also. So it is quite an exhausting process. Every company has a different set of questions they like to ask, different types of questions. Like quantitative companies in their SD roles tend to ask more questions towards the CP. While coming to Optiver, I'll talk about the Optiver process later even. So then the normal SD companies, they tend to focus more on DSA, companies like Google, Microsoft, etc., etc. So that was just about how my tests went. As I said, they were really exhaustive, at least for me. And I think it is for most of the people. Giving 6, 7 tests in a day is not easy at all. So now talking about the Optiver process of interviews, tests. So they had 3 rounds of tests after resume shortlist. So they had one test in which they had some neurosensical games and stuff. So that was the first round, in which the first round was 80 questions in 8 minutes, which is like what Optiver is known for in its tests. So I'd say that that is not a very difficult round per se. The questions are relatively easy. It is not a lot of maths, and I solved the question in around 6.5 minutes, the 80 questions. So I'd say that it is not very difficult to crack. Then they had some games in those rounds which were very easy. There were even games where you had to flip burgers quickly around the screen. So it is basically a game, that round. After that came the second round, in which we have reasoning tests, which were mainly logical and verbal reasoning. So those two rounds basically focused on your verbal skills, the verbal reasoning thing, and the second was logical reasoning, which was basically an aptitude test. Well, both of which it does not require practice, I would say. They are more about how good you are generally with logic. It is more of a common sense based test. And I guess people found it relatively easy. The third round was the coding round, which is a hacker rank coding test, in which we had 3 questions, all of which were related somehow to trading, but did not require any trading knowledge. They described the questions pretty well. And I'd say they had more use of DSA than CP, and a lot of logic, of course. They were also common sense based. I'd say do practice all the common data structures really well. Segment tree and Fenwick tree are really popular these days in all the coding rounds. So like do practice them a lot. So that is how the testing rounds were. Then came the interview process. On day one, I had 5 shortlists. First of which was Optiver. Then I had Graviton Quant. Then I had NK Securities Quant. Then I had NK Securities Coding. And then I had Goldman Sachs Coding. So uh, uh, for Optiver, they took 3 rounds of interviews, one of which was the first round, as they call it, and they called me later for the 2 rounds after all my other interviews. So the first round was basically a systems round in which they were talking about it. Actually, I felt that Optiver processes of hiring and the interviews were a lot different from the usual interviews where they just give you a set of coding questions to solve. Actually, they really focus more on the practical stuff, which was more commonsensical than coding stuff. So they just gave me a problem set, like if you are in, let's say, Amsterdam and you want to trade in an exchange which is in Frankfurt, Germany, then how would you set up a system so that you can trade while sitting at Amsterdam and have like the shortest possible time of trading? The interviewer guided me on how she wanted me to find a solution, and it really helped me, and it was a really interesting round. For the second round of Optiver, it was an HR round, and they really focused a lot on how well you can adapt to a foreign condition, how you work in a team, what was your previous team experiences, how like they even ask questions like what are the good qualities that you think about yourself, what are the worst qualities that you have. And really I think they really wanted to focus on your personality and how well you could adapt in a foreign place, and also a lot on your verbal skills, how good you are at communicating, what your thoughts are. And the final round was again a tech round in which they gave me a question which was basically on how to on developing a trading algorithm on spot. Of course, not what you can trade in the real world, but a very close simulation to that, which was basically how you start to think about how you can trade by coding. So they gave me a problem like you are getting prices from the exchange via a function, and you have to code that function. And then there is a you can send out your orders in that function, and then there is another function which is called after your order is executed, where it can be fail or order has been successfully executed or something like that. And they gave me a theoretical value of the stock, and they asked me how would you build your programming language logic, assuming that the theoretical price may be right or wrong for that stock. So it was really more of a practical experience on how things work. And again, that is what I think made it different from other rounds. Then I had Graviton quantitative round, which I will not talk a lot about, but it was again more on puzzles and probability and stuff, which I had talked about the 3 resources that I uh, practiced from, and they were really very, very similar. Then again came NK Securities Quant round, which was again very similar to this. The NK Securities coding round, however, was a lot different from Optiver's. It focused more upon CP. It focused very much upon dynamic programming. Most of the questions they asked were related to dynamic programming, and that is what was mainly like it involved a lot of like I'd say quantitative skills as well in the programming round as well, like how good you are with numbers and number theory and stuff. So they really wanted to test about how well you are with calculations and maths. Then came Goldman Sachs SD round, which was again different from both these. It was, I would say, a lot easier. The questions they asked were a lot easier. They had 3 rounds. The last round was basically just an interaction, but the first 2 rounds, they asked me very small coding questions. I don't even remember the questions now, and a bit of logical and aptitude based questions, which were related to common sense, I'd say. So that is how my day one went, and I finally got an offer from Optiver, which I was happy to receive. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't know if I have time left or not. Rutuja, I think people have questions in the chat.
Uh, yes, we could take up the questions during the question and answer round,
Yeah.
or would
So
you like to address them now? Uh,
you tell me. I'm happy to do either.
we'll take up them during the question and answer round.
Cool. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing such great
Yeah.
insights.
It was my pleasure.
Now I would thank you. Now I would like to call upon Simran ma'am, who's interning at Microsoft. A very warm welcome to you, ma'am. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Ritusha. Am I audible? Can you just confirm? Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So, uh, I'm Simran, and I'm interning at Microsoft for now. First of all, like most of the, as it is a software engineering workshop, so most of the round, like most of the process for most of the companies actually is the same. That is, first CV shortlist, then it comes to the coding round, that is the online assessment, and after that it comes to the interview. For the like there are some specific things which you need to know about all of these. So for the cv, what I would suggest that for the tech cv or it cv, the things which you should aware of, like you should not focus more like on the things which are not related to the tech. So what I would suggest, the two most important things in the tech cv is your, one is your cg and the other one is a project. So for now, the thing is that most of the things which you already like the CG is like now you cannot change your CG. So what you should more focus about is how to show your yeah, like your presentation skills in your CV. So when you're presenting a project, you should be clear about what you want to convey to the like to the company, and what are the skills which are actually important for the software intern. So like these are some things, like be specific about what things you want to convey. So that is something which actually helps in that. And second thing is like you should never pull like you should never put anything fake in your CV, because that is something which maybe can help you in the CV shortlist, but after that in the interview round, that will be the issue. So what I think is like your skills matters. So what you should have in your CV is your tech projects. And along with that, like some companies have your CG shortlist, and some like the CV shortlist in the first round is mainly your CG shortlist. Like there is no because that is actually a lot of students applies, and so that is something that. So uske baad the things which you can now focus about is the online assessment. So in the online assessment, there are some coding questions, as you know, like थोड़े बहुत coding. Actually, what matters there is like first thing कि उधर पे time pressure काफी ज़्यादा होता है. So the thing is like if you're haven't enough, it can be the scenario that you will be like having some like a lot of pressure, because just mental pressure will be there, because like there are a lot of coding tests lined up during the whole day. I'm not audible.
Uh, yeah, your voice is breaking in between, ma'am. Ma'am, we're still not able to hear you.
Yeah, you're not audible, Simran.
You're still not audible. Uh, could you speak up something?
It's joint.
Yeah, you're audible now, I think. Not now.
Is it fine?
I heard a bit. Maybe you could try switching off your video and speak up.
Interruption, like you can. What I was telling you about was online assessment. So online assessment, there are a lot of different types of questions which you can getting there. And it's like you will be under a lot of pressure that time. Harshad said there will be like line together on a day. Single day you have to give multiple tests. At time, like there you have to be very prepared about this. It should be clear about that there is a pressure, but you have to be mentally prepared about that. Start, understand like how you can prepare about that. Actually, like the which are like the bit and for the coding the another like and it and that's like I have like mainly interview
I
that I
guess
was
she is not very audible.
Um,
Rituja.
Ma'am, your voice is still breaking and
Maybe
your
you could
voice is
try
very
joining
low right
from a different device, like maybe your cell phone or something.
now. Or you could use your headphones or earphones if you're not using them already. Uh, should I invite Vishwas sir? He'll speak up till then. You could just fix your
am I
connection.
now
Could you speak up something more?
audible?
Yes, you are now.
Okay, what I was telling you about is the online assessment. So what there is like you have to be mentally prepared about that because there are multiple tests that are lined on a single day. So for that, how you should prepare about that is something like there are multiple platforms for that. But what I would suggest that do not go for multiple platforms because what happens is like you're doing multiple platforms, like you're going for the multiple platforms, but there you are not going for the variety of questions which you will be getting on a single platform. Like what I am trying to convey is like be specific about what platform you are choosing, and uske baad do that platform very regularly, I would say, like very in a consistent manner. So that is something which I would suggest. And uske alawa what happens in the coding round that you are given like there are different platforms on which the companies take the coding test. So what happens is sometimes you're in the mental pressure, and uske baad when you see a completely different structure on which you have to code the program, there is something which like you cannot really matlab, the mind is not in the state that you can directly think about something. So that is something what I would suggest ki thoda sa be mentally prepared, and uske alawa do practice on the various platforms. Like you can try for like because what happens is in some companies in some coding test you will be asked to write just a function, like you have to complete the function, and in the other ones you will be asked to write the complete code. So that is something which you should be mentally prepared about. Like you will not know much about the pattern in which you have to give the test. So that is something which I would recommend. So for that, definitely like there are some good the like I have preferred interview, but like I'm not sure where my voice was not audible. So what I would recommend is like what I have done was the interview bit platform and uske alawa the lead code. So these are something on which you will get the topic wise questions. So whenever you are doing a DSA topic, so for that topic, what you can do is to just search about that topic on these two platforms, choose anyone which you want. So on that platform, like you will be having the questions like easy, medium and hard, you will get those. And after that, like you can try those questions, like not much, but at least you should try. So for a topic, I would suggest ki thode bahut like you can go for easy first, then medium, and then a little bit of hard questions, because most of the companies ki jo level of difficulty hota hai, that is somewhere about the medium level. So that I would suggest. So this was mainly about the online assessment which you will have, and uske alawa the next thing is your interview. So in the interview, what generally happens is which happened in my case was like for a question for a particular scenario, you will be asked to go in depth. So this happens in my case. I'm not aware about other cases, but what happened in my case, there was a particular question which I have to completely I would say optimize that. So firstly, what I would recommend is like the interviewer wants to see your approach. So the thing is like you should firstly whatever you're like, you should not just the interviewer does not want the exact answer to his questions, but he want to see your approach. So whatever, like I would suggest ki whatever comes in your mind, do speak there. Like this is something like if you have in your mind like you're not sure whether it is correct or not, I would suggest ki you take time for
I'm not.
but do not wait for that ki matlab you have something in your mind and you're not what
Your voice is breaking in between again.
happened, Rutuja? Are you saying something? Okay, maybe there is
Hello.
some so this was it for the
Ma'am, it's still not audible. It's just breaking each minute.
Okay, like
Is your mic off, I guess?
for a mobile phone, so that is not. Okay, so like this was it from my side. Sorry, I couldn't continue.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing your journey and experiences. So sorry you couldn't speak up longer because of the internet connectivity. Next, I would like to call upon Vishwas sir. Uh, Hello, sir. Vishwas sir is currently interning at Audify. A very warm welcome to you, sir. Over to you.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, so hey everyone, I am Vishwas Kalani, and as she told, I'm interning at Audify. I'm not sure if all of you are aware of this company. So this is a startup which began its operations in 2019, and it's a company which makes applications for entertainment purpose. So like their main product is Audify, which is a music playbook app, and then there is a game called Football World. So let me begin telling about the test. And I think most of the things have been covered by other panelists, but I would like to cover some things which have not been covered, and things which I feel are important. So I would say that you must stick to a single platform while practicing for test, be it lead code or be it interview bit. So I practice from lead code, and so there are some plans on lead code, like there are some plans of mastering dynamic programming, and there are some plans of mastering trees and graph based questions. So you can practice through those plans. So they have like questions starting from easy questions, and then they grade up to the hard questions. So that is one thing about lead code. And then there are topic based tags on the questions, and you can practice questions on which you feel that you are weak. So for the test, what I would say, what important topics are there are dynamic programming. It is a very hot topic, and almost every test has a question on dynamic programming. Then there are questions based on binary search, and questions based on trees and graphs are also very popular. Questions based on data structures like sets and all are also very common. And apart from that, so like there are some questions in competitive programming based on number theory, based on bit manipulation, based on combinatorial maths. So I feel that those questions are not very important for the test and the interview process which is involved in these companies in the SD role. And so like there are so many companies in SD role which are coming through OCS, like Dish or Rubrik, Google, Microsoft, Uber, and Ordify, Instabase, and Coacity as well. So like I would like to tell a bit about the levels of the test that these companies had. So for D-Show, I think the test had all sorts of questions, that is easy questions as well, medium questions as well as hard questions. So for shortlisting, you must ensure that you are doing easy and medium questions at least. For rubric, like they have very few open positions, so they are very selective, and thus their questions are hard. And like their question, I remember, was based on 3D dynamic programming. And for Google, as Anjali ma'am told, that uh, one of the question was of medium level and one of the question was of hard level. For Microsoft, I remember the questions were easy. And for Uber, so Uber also is very popular for having a difficult test. And Uber has quite a different system for test, like questions provide you points, and there are some 500 points of the test, and you have to score as high as possible, and then you are shortlisted based on the score in the test. So let me tell you about the process which was there for Audify. So before that, like on day one, I gave my interviews for like Quadai, which was for quant role. For Quantbox, I gave interviews for quant role as well as SD role. So like I didn't get any offer on day one. I would like to tell specifically about the SD role interview of Quantbox because this is an SD workshop. So in that interview, I was asked to implement a vector from scratch from using basic data structures in C++ like array, and I was asked about other implementations of containers in STL library using some basic data structures in C++. So one thing I would like to tell is that the SD role for quant companies and for non-quant companies are quite different in nature of work, and I feel in the nature of their testing process and interview process as well. So like for quant companies, they will focus on your C++ skills. They will focus maybe a bit on your architecture knowledge, computer architecture knowledge, because their work involves that sort of things. So you will observe in the SDE test of quant companies that there are questions based on C++ as well. So you should be like familiar with pointer level programming in C++. That is also sometimes asked in the test. And apart from that, there are things like virtual functions, etc. So some companies would definitely test your C++ knowledge very deeply because that is the language which is very popular in quant companies. And apart from that, so in non-quant companies, the work involves working with databases and optimizing programs and things like that. So in some companies, you can see questions based on SQL being asked. But I would recommend that practice first of all things like competitive programming through some platform lead code and all, and then maybe you can go to the topics of C++ and SQL and things like that, because they are rare in test as compared to competitive programming. Then apart from that, I would like to tell something about the CV making process. So what is the thing important in SD roles CV is that you mention some important details of any of the projects that you have done, because it could be difficult for your employers to read your entire CV. So they'll be focusing on the key terms that you have written, maybe some terms that you have highlighted or that you have like made bold. So like in projects, you can highlight, let's say, some specific library that you used. For example, if you are making a game using SDL library in C++, then you should highlight that term. So that sort of thing must be there. Then in your CV, you should be able to highlight your strongest section. For example, if your strongest section is, let's say, any internship that you did, or any sort of project that is very important for you, then you should try to highlight it more as compared to other sections. As far as other things like extracurricular activities are concerned in CV, I think they are not very important for SD role. But if you have something like a position of tech coordinator in some event like Trist and all, then it could be very beneficial. And apart from that, as Simran told, that you should not write any technical skill which you are not having basically. So the people write technical skills in two pattern, I would say. That is one of the pattern in which I have written in my CV is that we write the languages we know, and we write the frameworks and tools that we are aware of. So by languages, I mean C++, Python, Java and all. And by frameworks, you could understand like simply working in Django and using some tool like ffmpeg or things like that. So you can write such things in CV, but you should write things that you are aware of, because you will be grilled upon them in your interview, and it would make a negative impact if you have written something random in your CV. So for me, the process for Audify was that I think the company came late in the campus. It was a day two company and it had no test. So it shortlisted using the CV, and I was shortlisted. And then their interview involved, first round was based on quant puzzles. So it's not very common for SD companies to ask quant puzzles in their interview, but some companies do ask. So in quant puzzles, I would say that there is a very popular site. I hope that many of you might be aware of a site called brainstellar.com. So Brainsteller is very popular site, and not only in quant interviews it would help in SD role interviews as well. So there are some questions which are very popular and they are asked straight away in the interview. Now, apart from that, the next round was based on again a competitive programming problem. So the problem was again of dynamic programming, which is popular in both in test and interviews. So they basically asked me to gradually build upon the problem, how I would make a recursive statement for the problem and how I would convert that into a dynamic programming solution. And they asked me to code in Google Docs. So one important thing I would like to mention is that in many companies test, there would not be something like IntelliSense. If you all are working in VS Code, if some of you are aware that there is a thing called IntelliSense in VS Code, so it recommends you functions. It recommends you the name of the function, the variables that you have written in your program. So you don't have to type them. But in some of the companies in the test, they'll provide you with a console that is not having that sort of intelligence. So you must practice writing code by turning off that intelligence in VS Code. So that would be very helpful in your interview as well, because you would be in habit of writing complete code. And apart from that competitive programming round, then there was an HR round. So in HR round, they'll ask some basic questions like, why do you want to join company? They'll grill you based on why you are suitable for that sort of job, and it should not be very difficult. You can prepare for HR round very easily. And apart from that, I think nobody has told about their experience working in SD role, so that could be helpful. I can tell a bit about that, because some people might have to choose whether they should be choosing a SD role internship or a quant role internship or a data science role internship or any other roles that are there. So for SD role, I think you will feel it very exciting to work if you are interested in learning new things, because in every company there would be some language which is used, and there would be some tool which is used, and there are some very standard things in software development which are used, like Docker containers and all. So you will have to learn those things. So if you are in habit of programming well, if you are in habit of learning new things quickly, then you'll be able to find those things exciting. And then your problem would be to optimize things. Your problem would be to find solution for things which are not there already. So it could be exciting in that way. And for controls, it is mostly based on some machine learning algorithms, and it involves aptitude related to probability and machine learning mostly. And for data science role, it is completely about machine learning. So for software development role, it is quite different from machine learning, which is quite popular in, I think, quant roles and data science role. So based on that, you can see whether you would like a SD role. And apart from that, what I would like to tell about working at startups is that so it's quite different from working in any big company. So like there are quite a few people, and so for Audify there are around 25 people in the company, and everybody is expected to be very efficient and productive. So like you can directly interact with the founders of the company. That is one benefit. And you can sometimes participate in the decision making of the company as well. And apart from that, it is like your work would be very involved, which is quite different in big companies. And like whatever work you might be doing in your internship, it could be definitely going at the production level. So there is a sense of satisfaction in working at startups, but there are again some demerits as well. So I think that is from my side. Yeah, I think we can now go to Q&A session.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for sharing your valuable experiences. Let us start with the question and answer round. Everybody just post your questions in the question and answer box. Do not post them in the chat box, otherwise it becomes difficult to address them. The first question is for Anjali ma'am. Can you suggest some resources to learn deeply from scratch? Anjali ma'am, I request you to take up this question.
Yeah. Like DP from scratch, mostly I think GFG's resources are really good. And if you really need like a complete guidance, I think there are some YouTube playlists like uh, you can search for them. They are quite famous playlists that like they would help you understand it from basics. When you can only focus also on like GFG, they also provide solutions tab and discussions tab. In fact, all the three platforms have this. And if you're stuck on something, you can go to discussions and get hint from there, or even like just check out the solutions because you don't have a lot of time to waste. So anything else like specific in DP you want to ask?
Uh, I mean, no, that is the question for now.
Okay.
Would any of the panel members would like to add anything to this?
I
I
think there
guess
are
not.
some very basic DP questions, standard DP questions that you will find everywhere and are actually asked a lot in the interviews. Like I have probably coded longest common subsequence problem like tens of times, even during the coding like tests we had. So practice the common ones first, and then you can practice the niche questions later.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. The next question is, how does one prepare for HR rounds?
I guess this is for me.
I mean, this is a general question. Any of the panel members could take it up. Please answer it, sir.
Cool. So for HR rounds, like there are some companies which do not give a lot of importance to the HR rounds, like probably the quantitative companies, even in their tech roles. And also major SD companies do not give a lot of importance to the HR rounds. It is just basic questions about like your CV. They ask questions from your CV and stuff. While mostly the companies which have come from another country, like let's say Rubrik or Optiver or Jane Street or other companies, they focus a lot on their HR rounds because it is really important on how well you can adapt to a foreign surrounding. So for those, you really have to be thorough with your CV first of all and have good speaking skills. Like stuttering does not help a lot there. So be prepared for the basic questions like why do you want to be a part of this company, your past achievements, how well you what are your skills, what are the things you think you lack, and stuff like that. And once I guess practice also makes you a lot better. Once you can give some mock interviews maybe with your seniors, that would help a lot. And also other thing is like it is not necessary that you crack the first interview that you sit in. So after giving one or two interviews, I think you get a lot better at these stuff than you were before. So I guess having experience matters a lot, and it is not very difficult to gain a good like position in your HR round once you have done one or two HR interviews.
Thank you, sir. Would anybody like to add upon to this? Anjali ma'am, Simran ma'am, Vishwas sir.
Yeah, so for that, actually, mock interviews help a lot about that. So in the general HR round, there are some general questions like which you can actually like just search for some HR round on the net, and you can just have an overview like how the questions are and how, so like you can practice about that, like how you can do that. And definitely mock interviews helps a lot, and after some interviews you will be very comfortable with that.
Thank you, ma'am. Moving to the next question. Projects done as a part of coursework are sufficient?
So I can maybe address this question. So it depends like first of all a bit on your department as well. Like computer science projects are very relevant to SD role, like they are the most relevant ones. But I think in other departments as well there are some projects which are involving programming, so that can also help. And like generally people write the name of professor and the duration of the project and some details of the project in course projects. apart from that, CV is like given a specific weightage in test and then in interviews. But I think if you have not done many projects apart from your course projects, it would not make a big difference. Yeah, that's what I would like to say.
थैंक यू सर. किसी को और कुछ ऐड करना है? I guess not. Moving to the next question. Does having a good code chef, code forces rating help in our CV if our CG is not so good?
Yes, definitely yes. If you are applying for an SDE role, having a good code forces rating like 1800 or 1700 does help a lot. Some companies even release forms for specific criteria, like if you have above 1700, you can just directly apply with that form and they'll directly shortlist you. So yeah.
Thank you, sir. The next question is, which all companies open for non-circuited branches for SDE and quant roles respectively?
For quant roles, I can say that only, I guess, Optiver opens for non-circuital branches. Maybe World Quant is another company which does. And yeah, that's it for quant roles. For
Yeah,
SD, I
and
guess Vishwas would be better. Someone.
yeah, and apart from these, like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, these also open for the non-circular branches. And Microsoft also, like for the SDE role, it has some special applications in which like there were some criteria, your code shift rating and all of that stuff, like your coding experience mainly. So yeah, there are companies that open for the non-circular branches.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. The next question is for Harshit, sir. Harshit, sir, near about how many questions should we do and how many you did?
Okay. So talking just about SD now, I guess there are some basic algorithms, like I'd say like about 40 of them given in Geeks for Geeks. There is a list of questions for interview there, topics for interview. So you should practice at least some questions on them. I guess on an average, if you do somewhere near 300 questions in total is good. Am I audible?
Yeah, it was just breaking for some time. No,
Cool,
it's
cool.
audible now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was saying that if I'd say that try to cover all the topics from the base, and then it depends on how much time you have. I would say you should practice at least a bare minimum of like 300 questions over 2 months. That is not a very large number. And then you can build upon how much you can do with the time that you have left, how much efforts you put in. I did around 450 questions for HD from Lead Code and Geeks for Geeks together.
Okay, thank you, sir. The next question is, how much time did you spend before giving up on a first GFG LC problem, second quant problem? That's a general question. Anybody could take it up.
So I think like you should be trying the questions, like for easy questions you should not code them up, you can think them in your mind. If the question is difficult and you are not able to crack it, I think you should see the solution after half an hour. That is decent amount of time to give to a question. And sometimes for some questions you might be feeling that you are just very close to cracking the solution, then maybe you can invest time according to you. And for quant problems, I think like there is no fixed time. There are some questions which are easy, so you can solve them quickly, and there are some questions which just involve a very little trick. So if you don't know that trick, then even if you spend hours thinking about that question, you might not be able to crack them. So for any question, I think half an hour should be the upper cap, because after that, that would be just a wastage of time. And yeah, you should definitely see the solution if you are not able to solve a problem. That is very important.
Thank you, sir. किसी को कुछ ऐड करना हो?
I guess that covered it.
Okay. Moving on to the next question. If we haven't done courses like computer architecture or operating systems, do they expect us to prepare them for us to prepare for themselves or to prepare for them ourselves?
Hmm. I think that not all companies, first of all, ask these questions. And moreover, if you do not have experience in them, you can tell the interviewer that it has not been a part of your curriculum. So you are not very well versed in that. But if it is required, you can definitely learn it later. Something like that definitely helps. But yeah, you should try to cover the base questions of C++, I guess, virtual functions and these kinds of stuff, but not everything is required if it is not of a part of your curriculum for most of the SD companies.
Thank you, sir. The next question is, are brain cell and probability questions asked for SDE role as well?
No.
Yeah, you can go on, Arshad.
Yeah, it's just that it's no, they are not asked.
Actually, some companies might ask them. Like for me, JPMC was a SDE role, and still they asked like some brain stellar questions, but they were quite basic. So it's better you do some of the puzzles, even for SDE role.
Yeah.
Keeping in mind that JPMC and Goldman Sachs are quant plus tech firms, so yeah.
Yeah, but still, like for me in Audify as well, they asked brain cell questions. But again, like it's not that important. The important thing is competitive programming only. But still, very few companies ask that sort of questions. Yeah.
Uh, okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. The last, okay, the next question is, which companies hire from third year dual degree students?
Yeah, since I am a dual degree student as well, so like third year dual degree students, very few companies open. But Jane Street opens, Google mostly opens, Adobe, Hotstar used to come. So they're like the companies are comparatively very less, but still a lot of companies would open. So you should prepare for them. Like it is a really good thing if you get a internship from OCS in your third year itself. So like don't be disheartened that there will be very few companies. You might get an internship in them. So like prepare.
And Uber opens as well. Yeah.
Okay, moving on to the next question. Do we have to choose the language that we have to code in, or the company decides the language?
No, like you can choose the language on your own, and there is no specific language like this is good or this is. But the thing is, like you should be aware about some inbuilt libraries so that you can save time in the coding. So yeah, in whichever language you are familiar with and comfortable, you can choose that.
Adding to that, yeah, mostly companies give you a list of languages that you can choose from, but there are some companies which just give you one or two options. Like some companies give just C or C++, and there are very limited companies that do this, but yeah, there are some companies.
Yeah, and I remember, I think in Microsoft's data science test, there was a very specific question that was
Yeah,
asked to be
that
coded in
was
Yeah,
in.
correct. R or Python, yeah, only two
Yeah, for the
languages.
data science, it happens.
Yeah.
Thank you for answering that. I guess we're done with all the questions. If anybody has any question, just switch on your mic and answer it. Ask it. Or you could also, we'll be taking up some few questions if you just post them in the question and answers. We'll just wait for 2 minutes. If there are no other questions, then we'll wrap up the session.
sir, I have a question. Hello, am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, in my present situation, I have some post projects to put in my CV, but I don't have any external project or full-fledged project right now. So, what can I do for now? Like, should I do the work on projects right now, or focus on the thesis problems or the interview questions?
So you were not completely audible, I guess, but I think your question was that you have not done many projects and all, and should you focus on doing some project or work on competitive programming? So I would recommend like you should be working on competitive programming only, because in such short time, I think doing some project would not be very helpful. And again, you can like if you are able to manage your time, then you can distribute your time. Like you can work on some project on C++, and then by that you can learn that language as well, and like that thing will help you in competitive programming as well. But I would say that mainly focus on the test and interview process rather than working on some projects. Was that your question, or did I misunderstood?
Yes, sir, that was my question. Thank you.
Okay.
We also have another question. What are the general CG criteria?
So I guess CG criteria for quant roles are higher. I guess the least amount of CG that they take is above 8 for Graviton. Optiver does take 7.5, but it is like a very niche firm. Other than that, for SDE, I guess some of the companies have a criteria of 8.5, some have 8, and most of the companies, like after day 1 and day 2, I guess 7.5 or 7 remains the CG cutoff.
Like, I want to add to this, like if your CGPA is like on the borderline of like the criteria the company is mentioned, you have just apply for that. Like if your CG is 7.9 and the company has mentioned 8, please apply because they consider borderline cases. Like they shortlist them.
Thank you for answering that. Do we have any more questions? I guess we don't. I would like to thank all the panelists for taking up time from their busy schedules and guiding us through this session. I guess we'll wrap up the session. Thank you all for attending the session.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thank you guys. All the best for your internships.